Hello and welcome to the program Woke Up. And today on the show, we have Rebecca Dillingham, who is an intellectual. She's a former leftist, a former socialist, feminist, uh, critical social justice warrior and champion. And she's the host of the Dissident Mama podcast and a writer. And her slogan is smashing sacred cows with a bang and not a whimper. And she woke up several years ago. And so, Rebecca, thank you and welcome to the show. And I want everyone to get ready to fasten your seatbelts because you're going to learn a lot today. And we're going to have some paradigm shifts for all those listening today.
Hopefully. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
So, Rebecca, you went to University of Wisconsin-Madison and were totally brainwashed. So why don't you bring us back there, like your childhood, and then what happened to you in university, and tell us about what's going on here.
All right. I was born in 1971, and I'm not going to start at the womb, but I think it's important to talk about the decades that I was raised in, and there's differences and parallels for today. But feminism was a thing back then. Obviously, 73 is when Roe happened, so like the feminists are really getting rip roaring started in the early 70s. But being raised back then, didn't lock the doors. Kids ran around all day long. Parents didn't know what they were. It was a very free time. Not hands-off parenting, not like, there wasn't neglect, but just there was a lot of freedom entailed in that. 80s, just doing the dorky 80s thing. My high school was just normal people, normal cliques, hippies and pot smokers and preps and all that kind of thing. So anyway, the 80s was like pretty just like normal. I was raised Catholic, and then somewhere along the way, my dad pulled us out of parochial school and we started going to public school, and then we just went to church less and less. So we weren't a godless family, but there wasn't really praying even before meals and stuff like that. So I'm a Christian. If somebody had asked me, I guess I would say, sure, I guess I'm Catholic. But, as the years progressed, just less and less of that. But there's also this thing where I think back then, parents, they knew universities were liberal, but they just kind of thought, well, my kid will go to college and be a liberal, and then they'll come back and get married and have babies, and then they'll be a conservative. Like it was kind of not this expectation that you would be like completely transformed and destroyed spiritually, mentally, physically. It was just kind of like, you'll dabble in some liberalism. And liberalism, I think, is very different from leftism and wokeism. But, it'll just be okay. And there was no like real prep for it. My dad like listened to Rush Limbaugh and stuff like that. I mean, they were aware of the world, but they just didn't see it as a huge threat. It was just a normal thing, a part of this process of maturation and growing up. The whole, I guess it was Churchill or whatever who said, when you're young, you're going to be a liberal, and when you're older, you're going to be a conservative. They just thought it was a thing. So anyway, I think
you just glanced at briefly liberalism and leftism, and I think a lot of parents have that same view that the kid goes to university and he gets exposed to different ideas and different thoughts and liberal thought. But I think so many parents have been shocked by the indoctrination that's happened and the radical leftist ideology that's actually taken over the university system entirely. And there's a big difference between this woke critical social justice leftism that's seeking to destroy versus classical liberalism and maybe some left-leaning political thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And, more and more people are seeing it now, but it had to get to this point for people to be like, hey, maybe I don't want to pay for my kid to be utterly destroyed or whatever. So anyway, I didn't go to college. I tinkered around with college a little bit, but the expectation was, you go to college and get some kind of 4-year degree, you become a professional. And I ended up like going to community college a little, like went to East Carolina for like 1 semester and dropped out because I was partying and all this kind of thing. So finally, I had the good sense to say, after like wasting a bunch of money and time, that's a theme that I'm going to talk about, wasting time, because I think that's what leftism does to people. It steals your time, which is the most valuable thing you have on planet Earth is your time. But finally, then I traveled around and went to see concerts and all this kind of thing. I was a hippie, like a deadhead, and I saw the band Fish a lot. And then finally, I got serious. I was like, okay, This was in 1994. I graduated in 89 from high school.
Well, you were a real deadhead. You
Mhm.
indicated you've been to like 100 of their concerts. You traveled everywhere.
Almost. I lost count, but it was like high 80s, low 90s, but I'm always just like, 100-ish.
Ah,
But yeah, I wasted a lot of time and money, driving to California from Virginia and all this kind of thing. So drug use and that, and free love, and all those kinds of things that are just part of that package. So I decided I wanted to go to Wisconsin because somewhere along the way I discovered my love for writing. Like I'd always been, made good grades in English class, but I didn't ever think about it. But I wanted to be a journalist and save the world. I didn't want to report the facts, but I wanted to save the world. So I decided I was going to move away from Virginia, where I was born and raised, and go somewhere where I wouldn't be distracted by, like my friends, that, hey, you want to drive to Philadelphia and see a Dead show? I didn't want that temptation because even back then, again, I didn't have much common sense at the time, but I had the good sense to say, I wouldn't be able to resist that. So I was like, I wanted to be just far enough away from Virginia, but to where I could get in the car and drive home quickly, like if there was a family emergency. And back then, an 18-hour road trip was nothing. Now that I'm old, I think 2 hours is a long time. So anyway, I was, just kind of like average. I don't even think I was a leftist back then, just kind of like hippy dippy, not really thinking about it. So I was like a sponge. I was just like, went to Wisconsin and I just soaked it all up. And the interesting thing, again, when the decades make an important part of the story, is because when they told me all these very leftist things, I hadn't really heard them to the degree and to the dramatic degree that they're telling you out there. It's not just like, oh, women are need equality or something like that. It was anti-male, and all these institutions are keeping you down. Let's talk about women of the house never had power. So all these things started happening there, and because I was not prepared and I'd never heard these things. Like now people hear these things like watching commercials. But back then it was, whoa, the truth has been hidden from me my entire life. And the scales are coming off of my eyes. And I see truth now. And of course, now I'm smarter than everybody else too, because I know this, but my family back home doesn't. And these old people that I used to know don't know this. So it gives you this air of superiority too, because you know the secrets. You have the keys to the kingdom now, and you know why everything's so bad, even though things weren't really bad. And that's the funny thing, looking back at my feminism. I was supposed to be this man hater, but I had like tons of guy friends, I, was thought women were oppressed and the institutions kept us down, but I never expected to get a job or an internship because I was a woman. I still had like a work ethic from my parents. I just would work harder if I didn't get the internship. I'd just be like, oh, okay. I wouldn't use the excuse. So it's interesting. I wasn't even using some of the tools that come along with feminism to make people feel like whatever, like everybody's out to get you. And then another part too, being a journalism major.
You never claimed victimhood. You never put
I didn't.
that mantle on.
No. I'm sure like if some guy broke up with me or something, I was like, oh, he's a jerk and he just hates women, something like that. And that's another thing too. I didn't dabble in lesbianism. Just the thought of it, I was like, no. I even, I was like, maybe I should try it. And even in Wisconsin, in my wildest days, I was like, no, I didn't want to do that. And then, so I had like this, like, I guess the traditionalism somewhere in me, And then another thing, being a journalism major, I would have never thought of censoring someone ever in 1,000 years. Now I'd spar with people, and I like debating with people too, so I liked talking to people, and that's how, so I didn't want to stifle people's opinions. I didn't want to call people names. I mean, I'm sure I cried and called people names like in the heat of an argument, but I wouldn't have been like wanting to like silence someone. That the thought never crossed my mind. And I don't think anybody in the J school back then, as wild and leftist as they were, that just wasn't a thing. Nobody wanted to censor anybody else. Now we thought we knew the truth and we were smarter than everybody else, but there was none of this new stuff of just completely shunning learning, shunning dialogue, and shunning conversation. That was just not a thing. So anyway.
Yeah. So you were in this, and you're being indoctrinated with women's studies, and you've gone from that young woman, well, in your 20s, and these are some of the things that you've written that I find are just compelling and fascinating. And the title of your show and your podcast and your blog is "The Dissident Mama." And a dissident is like undermining the authority of the structures, and you are basically using a term that the left would use for dissidents, but you're using it against them, which I think is fascinating. The textbook definition of dissident is a person who opposes official policy, especially that of the authoritarian state, and challenges the established doctrine, policy, or institution. They are the norm. Simply proclaiming yourself a radical nonconformist or a revolutionary trendsetter does not make you one by virtue of misusing words. I mean, when you're thinking in lockstep with most politicians, public agencies, the courts, schools, universities, libraries, art museums, state-funded, quote, science, corporations, nonprofits, activist groups, mainline evangelicals and Jews, the Pope, the World Bank, Hollywood, social media, the mainstream press, advertising, and all the puritanical purveyors of, quote, acceptable behavior, you really can't be more in line with the official policy than that. Newsflash, it's you who's bracing the status quo.
Everybody with eyeballs knows that that's not the case. I mean, I think it's like international pronoun, and corporations I know are sending out today, breathless proclamations about how, if you work in a corporation, you better celebrate International Pronouns Month. Of course, that's not even a thing, and whatever, and back during the Summer of Love in 2020, corporations were telling people to black out their Facebook pages. I mean, telling employees, I know this happened from friends who work in corporations. I mean, you can't go to the library without a drag show taking place. My kids can't watch an MLB game without some crazy commercial or whatever. Some kind of virtue signaling for the woke ideology. So they are the dominating structure of everything, from warfare to welfare and everything in between. So, we're the weirdos, we're the ones on the margins, we're the ones who are screaming from the highest rooftop that we're not going to comply with this stuff. So, and there's, there's probably more of us than you and I know about, but a lot of them can't speak their minds because they work for, say, a corporation or, maybe even have a government job, So it's just not fashionable to push back against this stuff, That's why they call it hate, and we don't love, and we're racist, and we're anti-Semitic, and we're xenophobic, whatever, just all the stupid ad hominems. So, yeah, I mean, we are dissident. We are the ones who are against this status quo. Now, if we lived in a traditional society and things were quote unquote normal, I mean, let's just even take 1950s America. Yeah, we would not be the dissidents, but we are now. So if the shoe fits,
Yeah, it's I've had numerous guests that wanted to do interviews without the camera. Others that have used pseudonyms, if that's what you pronounce it, that because of they're afraid to just tell their story, and because of the possible repercussions from their employer and other institutions of society. And so that's way far away from traditional liberalism. And so the thing that I'm most intrigued about is the leftists. They act like they're so cutting edge and so progressive and such free thinkers. These people are absolutely compelled and bound to their ideology. And I can meet a leftist and talk to them, and I can guarantee you, the moment they say they're non-binary or something like that, I can tell you exactly what they believe on abortion, Palestine, capitalism, the patriarchy, the Republican Party, the history of the United States of America. It's like there's no thought put into it. There's no free thought. And it's just this bondage to conform within the ethos and the subculture of this controlled, illiberal ideology that keeps everybody in bondage. And there is no freedom in it, but yet they think we're the ones that are cutting edge, and we're the ones that are standing up against intolerance, but they're the ones that are the most intolerant people that that are alive in the name of tolerance. It's an upside down world. It's been absolutely inverted, and so that's why I was so. I really enjoy your writing, and some of the things you say are quite pithy and very subversive and
Good.
it's a very strong
Subversive in a good way.
I know, the good subversive.
Good subversive. Well, and we're talking about the show about the gaslighting, so on one hand, the scholars that want to decide, hate experts and, who are the bad people and, tell us what our opinion should be on everything. They want to be the gatekeepers of this information. So we're supposed to look to the experts and the scholars and the academics on whatever the issue happens to be, right? But at the same time, logic is an example of whiteness. Learning and making good grades, that means you're a racist because you're just copying the evil whiteness. Well, what's her name? Robin DiAngelo. What's her stupid book called?
White fragility.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's white fragility. If you want to, if you point that out, you're fragile. So you can't even push back against the illogic because logic is whiteness. But you have to trust these people who are credentialed and have PhDs behind their name because they're so smart. So I guess we're not allowed to learn and read things and culturally criticize things, and so it's funny you called me an intellectual in the beginning. I mean, I just have a bachelor's degree. I'm a homeschool mom. I have a blog. I walk my German Shepherd, go to church, try to be a good wife. So I'm just a schlub, but I can, there's a saying in the South, don't pee down my leg and tell me it's raining. I got that. I got a good BS detector and I'm passing that on to my kids too, because you can't, all of this is just a big sham. So anyway, I just think it's funny. On one hand, they're allowed to have their academics that can tell us what to do. But if we want to think or learn or change our mind or something, or have a discussion when somebody plants a seed about an inconsistency, oh, it's just your whiteness, and then if you're tell them that's stupid, you're fragile. So it's a really good gig if you can get it, I guess. But it makes no sense.
Or if in their struggle sessions where they pressure you to confess your sin of racism, and there's pressure there, and you start crying. Oh no, that's white tears. It's you can't win. You can't. Yeah. It's just there's no argument, and the corruption associated with the DEI, and we look at what happened with Black Lives Matter as tens of millions of dollars was pumped in. And their website says that they exist to destabilize the nuclear family. They want to focus in on the trans community, and then all of a sudden they change their website, give all donations to the Democrat Party, and then we actually have their leaders in interviews saying that the idea of calling say the name is like calling up the dead spirits because they interact with their ancestors out of Africa, and they've had visitations from them, and they started their rallies with libations. Yeah. And then we find out that tens of millions is gone, and they're invested in mansion houses. And then we see what's going on in what is it, Boston or Brown University? I don't want to misquote the university, but Ibram X. Kendi received $40 million and produced 2 academic papers. And now even within the group, they're accusing him of corruption and fraud. And so in many ways, this leftist experts that we look to and media picks up on, and social media, and just manipulates the entire populace, is fraught with corruption. And what have they really done? When we see poll after poll that comes out that says ever since George Floyd died and the subsequent destabilization in our urban centers, blacks and whites alike feel like racism has not gotten better, or in most cases it's gotten worse. Only 10% say that there's been an improvement. And so we just see this destabilization and this insecurity, and that's just along the BLM route and the critical race theorist route, and all these experts that this is what's taken over corporate America and the university system, and that not to mention what's the emergence since COVID of queer theory and the trans movement, destabilizing family, and we just see this going around, and the pressures for everyone to conform with compelled speech, with pronoun use, denying objective reality of what's in front of you. And so what I really love is that you are a voice of reason, and you're not doing these rituals and these games, and you're not bowing the knee before this new religion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just, back in 2016, 2017, fewer people were, people were talking about it, but it was like more fringy. So that's one of the reasons I created the blog, and I started the podcast in 2020 when, there were lockdowns and I had all this free time. And now I have no time and I still have a blog and a podcast. So I'm like, oh, why did I do that? But anyway, I've met a lot of really interesting people. But what was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So it still wasn't like mainstream. So for example, like back in like 2017, 2018, there was a conservative homeschool guy, like he's a bigwig. And I remember this was back when I used to be on Facebook, and he was sharing the story about a Milwaukee public school that was like a BLM. So this is way before George Floyd, so like people still didn't kind of know what BLM was, and they just thought, oh, it's this thing to help Black people. Nobody really poked into it to that much. The normies didn't poke into it. And he was just saying how great this was. And there were all these pictures from this, I guess it was like a Milwaukee Journal article of like the pictures with like Black Power fists and whatever revolutionary stuff and BLM propaganda, like all in the school. This was like an elementary school. And he was just saying how great it was. And I shared with him on Facebook. I said, do you know what the BLM homepage says? I will tell you. And it's all the stuff you just said, destroy the nuclear family, smash the patriarchy, blah, 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 whiteness bad, blackness put up on a pedestal, whatever. And he said, this is supposed to be like a guy who like studies the trivium, understands classical learning, right? He's imparting wisdom and logic to children. He said, it doesn't matter what the website says. It's still a thing. I don't think he says that anymore. So, but that's funny. The whole point is like this rapid pace of progressivism. On one hand, it stinks when you live through it because it's craziness and it's constantly changing, and they're upping their game and overplaying their hand. And at some point, I guess there's going to be an end point, a tipping point. But that could be 200 years from now. Who knows? However, people are, the craziness has made people like this guy that I'm using as an example. I don't think he talks about how great BLM is anymore. Now, on the flip side, people that used to be kind of conservative, some of them have become completely unhinged allies, like the VeggieTales guy, Phil Vischer. My kids watch VeggieTales growing up or whatever, and they were very, very sweet. Maybe theologically they weren't always on the ball, but they were good, wholesome, videos and movies and stuff. And he's got a podcast now, and it's all, he has just consumed the BLM Kool-Aid and all of it. It's crazy. So these are wheat and chaff opportunities that if the scales come off, you're going to have to start pushing against these things that you wouldn't push against 5 years ago. You're just going to have to, because it's a matter of survival, or you're going to conform and join, and it's gonna be black and white. And a lot of people want to say, well, I'm moderate or I'm not political. And we were talking about this the other day in the pre-interview chat. I think it's Trotsky. I meant to check for sure, but I think it was Trotsky who said the revolution, you may not care about it, but it cares about you. To say that you first of all, I think it's naive to say, I'm just in the middle. I can't choose a side. I see it as like a good and evil thing. You're gonna have to. You aren't so special that you can just be in the middle, because it's coming to you every single day in your home, in your church, driving down the road, what kind of car you drive, et cetera, et cetera. It's everything. The feminists said the personal is political, and that's one of the things they were right on. It's because everything has been made political. So to say you can be not political, or, I don't care, there is no culture war. That's a new thing that I keep hearing, like evangelicals and some weirdo Orthodox saying. I'm just like, okay, culture is everything, and religion's supposed to be at the center of it, setting the tone. So, wow, that says a lot about you, that you think culture is not even a thing, or there is no culture war. So I like these moments of clarity. They are frustrating, and you want to shake your fist and get really annoyed at people and frustrated, because it's like a psyop. It is like psychological martyrdom. That's what Father Seraphim Rose called it. He said in the end times, it's not going to be so much physical torture, it's going to be psychological. And I think we can all attest to that. Whether or not these are end times, nobody knows, but there's some there's some psyops going on. So anyway, I like these moments of clarity, and I think it makes people turn around faster as opposed to my thing. So I graduated from Wisconsin in 99, and then it took me until 2006 to find Christ. I waited 7 years to have babies. Oh, I didn't even have my husband's name when we first got married. He did say, he had the good sense, he's like, if we ever have kids, they're having my last name. And I'm like, oh, okay. But anyway, I was like, oh, I got to have my last name because I've already written stuff and I'm an already published author, and my byline, people already know me. It's like, nobody knew me. It's ridiculous. So anyway, before we had kids, I got it changed to his last name. And the funny thing is, that's my dad's last name. Somebody made that point recently, and I had thought of that. I was like, how come nobody's made this point? All that is me keeping my dad's last name, so it's not fighting the patriarchy. It's so stupid.
Yeah, you're sustaining the patriarchy. Exactly.
So unless I was going to take my mama's last name, but that's her daddy's last name. I mean, it's crazy.
That's funny.
So anyway, came to Christ in 2006, but that was a long process. So graduated Wisconsin in 99, got married in 2000, 7 years of purposefully not having baby. Purposefully. So I had my first kid at age 36, and I should have been having my last kid at age 36. And then we thought we were so smart. Well, we'll have two really close together, so we can homeschool. We already knew we were going to homeschool when we started having babies. And, that'll be easy because they'll be using the same curriculum and all this kind of stuff. And then God said, Rebecca, you're going to have identical twins. So you're going to have 3 kids, 16 months and younger, all at the same time, all in diapers, and you're pushing 37 at this point. Or I guess I was 37, pushing 38. So God has a really good sense of humor. It was wild. But that was wasted time. I wish I had so many more kids. And like I said, was having my last at 36, or was done by 36, 5 or 6, So anyway, it was physically hard.
The thing about you, though, is that you were tremendously blessed by God that you even had children waiting so long, because and not that 36 is extraordinarily long to wait, but how many women have adopted this feminist ideology and, the fear for the planet warming and the putting off getting married. They're not even dating. And then when they do get married, they put off having children. Then they're well into their 30s or into their career. And then they want to have kids, and something happens and they can't have any kids. And what do they really accomplish? And the sadness and the depression of not having motherhood as part of your life is an epidemic here in our society as well. We see decreasing birth rates. And so you were spared because you were sucked in for a lost decade of wasting time, as you indicate, believing these crazy ideologies. And, then once you had the veil and the scales removed, when you saw that there is a transcendent God who loves you and has paid the price for you, and you gave your life to Jesus, and you opened up that spiritual side to you, that's when that's when the scales fell off your eyes, like Paul, and you saw the world clearly and from a different perspective, instead of the bondage that you were living for so long.
Yeah. I call it lifelong learning. I'm not an expert on anything, and I don't think anybody is. As far as like Orthodoxy goes, I'm an Orthodox Christian. People who come in are like, oh, I don't know anything. And, how am I going to learn all this stuff? I mean, you'll never know. It's a deep well. I mean, there are mysteries. Nobody knows everything. So when the modern society wants to teach people to shut off their critical thinking skills or not foster them, because it takes practice, I mean, just saying yes, being a yes man, super easy. Oh yeah, I'm going to do what that guy's doing and dress like that person and parrot what they're saying. I mean, that takes nothing. Like that's why they're called NPCs, or Borgs, or whatever people call these wokesters, is because it doesn't take any work at all. But stealing that from people, and that's one reason I don't want to say some people are hopeless, because I think God can change anybody's heart. God is imprinted on everybody's heart. But man, a lot of these Gen Zers don't have the tool to even try to break out of the paradigm. And that's it's heartbreaking. My generation did. My Gen Z sons are very skeptical of everything. Now that has to be housed in a faith paradigm. There has to be faith at the center, because and it's like I don't want them questioning God, but everybody questions God sometimes. So I'm not saying like I'm beating my kids over the head and not let them ask questions about God. But my point is, from a faith-centered perspective, I think it's a very good thing to have skepticism about the bill of goods on whatever it is that we're being sold. And that is one thing some Gen Zers have, but I think millennials, a lot of them don't have it because they were from that middle generation in there that being raised by like my generation, and a lot of them just don't have the skills. So I mean, we need to pray for these people because it's a form of slavery. It absolutely is. And people go, oh, it is. You are in spiritual bondage, sometimes physical bondage, right? If you're having abortions and cutting off your genitals or whatever. I mean, the things you do, the baggage you get from having lots of premarital sex, just the deviance of all the freaky things and bestialities on the rise. And I mean, Lord, it's, what was I saying? Oh, so it's when you are a slave to the flesh, we're supposed to be slaves to Christ. And that is slavery. It's slavery to sin. You are in bondage to your sin and your fleshly desires and immediacy. And if it feels good, do it. And let's up it 1,000%. That is slavery. So it is not nice. It is not nice to yourself. It is not nice to society. It's bad for your heart, So, and I say this as a person who has sin issues. I do. We all do. But I know there's sin issues, and you repent and you try not to do them. So, when anything goes, when you live in a society where anything goes, and I feel sorry for people because, especially, I was going to say especially women, but I feel just people trying to date these days and that kind of thing. It's very hard. And then women, like back then, like a loose person, a person who's, having premarital sex and partying and stuff. I would think, and I'm just doing this like anecdotally, like from my friends who were like me. I mean, nobody's having sex with like 100 people. We're having premarital sex and way more than we should. But now, I mean, we didn't have TikTok channels. We were doing all these things. Like there was kind of a get out of jail free card because the damage wasn't so visible. Now it was internal, I think that when men and women bring that to marriages, you're bringing all that baggage, and it's just a bad foot to start off on. But now, I mean, it's a much deeper hole to dig out of. More sexual partners, more deviancy, more abortions. I mean, the levels of birth control and all this kind of stuff. It's just worse now, So that's another thing too. I think some women get to their 30s and they're like, oh, maybe I do want to get married now. And guys are like, I think I want to go for the 22-year-old who slept with 3 guys as opposed to you who slept with 50. I mean, it's not it's not good. And then from the perspective of being a boy mom and now a young men mom, on one hand, to find a traditional girl, it will be increasingly harder, but I think like a shaft of light will be shining on her, and it'll be so obvious that she's, doesn't have that past, but maybe not. I don't know. My boys aren't interested in dating yet. Maybe it's just because they can't find anybody their age that seems traditional, but yeah, I don't even remember what the question was, but coming at it from my generation, I was lucky. I was really blessed that I found my husband in my 20s, and that we were, married within 2 years. And even though this is a funny story, I thought that marriage was an oppressive institution, and he had told me so many times he wanted to propose to me, but he thought I would say no. And then I finally proposed. Well, he told me this after the fact. And then I finally proposed to him in the car driving from Boone to to Virginia. I think we were driving from Virginia to Boone, where we were living in sin. And I proposed to him listening to a Ween song. So it was very romantic. And he said yes. And then we were married. Gosh, like that following October. That was probably like in the spring. But like the torture I did to my poor husband. And I'm lucky he even wanted me. Like ridiculous. I'd be like, whatever, lady, get out of here.
He saw the jewel that you are, and he saw
Oh.
like who you have become. But I do have little more. It's dark. It's dark here in our society, unlike ever before. But I do maintain optimism. I mean, I love doing this show. It's a wonderful hobby for me to be stimulated and to learn from people. And everybody that's on the show, we're intentional. There are former leftists in the ideology that have left it, and you just the stories are just really compelling. And I know as a Christian that the hand of the Lord is not too short to save, and that where sin increases, grace will increase as well through Jesus and God. And so there is hope, and even you, who had a rough decade and dark ideology and crazy thoughts. God reached into your heart, and some. I'd like to talk a little bit more about that transitional period from being a woke feminist in university against the patriarchy, looking at the world as oppressive toward women, some of the contradictions you were experiencing, but then like what turned on the light? How did you get out of that?
Well, marriage, first of all. So got married in 2000. It was an atheist wedding. Went out of our way to, um, she was like a justice of the peace lady, don't mention God. We wrote our own vows and all this kind of thing. I got married in a green wedding dress because I was like, green's my favorite color. I don't need to wear white. So just whatever, being silly. Uh, we recently, 2 summers ago, got crowned in the Orthodox Church. So the sacrament of marriage has been bestowed to us, and we are very thankful for that. So we now have a secular anniversary date and then an Orthodox wedding date. So that's fun. But that's the only fun part about it. So started off on the wrong foot, but we were getting married, so that's good, not living in sin. We were committed to each other. This wasn't an open marriage. I'd never been like into cheating. Like I knew friends who like would date guys and then cheat. I'm like, what's the point? So anyway, I was committed to him. Let's be together forever, proverbial rocking chair on the front porch kind of thing. So when you're living not just for yourself anymore, that's a good thing. You're thinking about somebody else. And even though we were like, let's split things 50-50, we were just probably, when we were both working, there were like fights over that and stuff. But still, I mean, there was like delineation of, there's things I do and there's things you do. And that's just how this relationship's going to be. So kind of reality starts to set in with, roles in the home and stuff like that, even before kids, just owning a home or living in an apartment or whatever. So that is one of them. And then this is going to sound so cliche and weird, but September 11th happened, a year after we got married. And that was just like a shake to people to start thinking outside of the box on a lot of things. Like, why did this happen? Why do people hate us? What's it about? Now, I went through a neocon stage and like loved George Bush and all this kind of stuff. I actually went to a pro-war rally. It was a rally in Raleigh, to go into Iraq, like, let's go, bombs a blazing. Like I went through that stage. People who know me now are gonna be like, "Oh my goodness, she went to a pro-war rally." Yes, but that was the thing back then. If you don't love it, leave it. Wearing like my pro-America shirts and all this kind of stuff. But I'm not anti-America. It's just that America has a history of not, at least in the founding, not having entangling alliances or not wanting to, like being friends with all, fair trade with everybody, yada, yada. Let's just be friends with everybody. We don't need to be fighting in all these foreign wars, the complete opposite of today. So anyway, September 11th happened. So I had to go through this neocon stage, then this libertarian stage to where I am now, just traditionalism, free association, you know, uh, no entangling alliances, just I want the government out of our business, whatever. Things should be localized, not at the national level, whatever. That's more like the political thing, but it started political because of September 11th, which was a political thing, and then I went into the political thing, but then that ended up over the course of the 2000s, the first decade of the 2000s, opening me up again. Okay, if I've been lied about this, what else have I been lied to about?
Mm.
If I think this is a consensus thing well, it's a consensus thing, but it makes no sense. Well, let's look into why it became a consensus. Who said it was consensus? What else? So,
Mm.
like, again, it was like just lifelong learning, like I'm always, talking about here and on my podcast. I wasn't an expert and stuff, but I just started questioning the things. And as I started going through these stages, you know, okay, well, that makes sense. But those other 10 things in this ideology or in this worldview don't make sense. And then started having kids in 2007. That again, that's a whole different ballgame. You're the world's best parent with the greatest advice until you start having kids, right? So you really start thinking not for yourself. You're not just thinking for your husband too. And what I mean thinking, I'm like thinking as like a team, it's not just about Rebecca anymore. I have to consider his feelings or what his wants and needs are. Now I have, by 2008, 3 kids, and then you're just like, whoa. And along the way, as I'm in like my conservative journey from neocon to libertarian to like paleocon to like traditionalist, I guess is what I would call myself now. You got to give labels just so people know, but I'm just a traditionalist. I don't live everything like a traditionalist, but I want to be, I mean, and again, I'm trying to break out of old habits and stuff. And, it's just really hard to live a traditional life in our society, but, I at least have those goals. So anyway, it just kept questioning, and then, still learning. I mean, there's something I believe right now, possibly that, probably that maybe doesn't pass the smell test, and I just haven't figured it out yet. So once you kind of have like that umbrella of like, okay, you're questioning things, consensus maybe is a bad word, and maybe you should assume it's BS from the beginning of something's consensus. And where did these things come from? Roots of stuff. I've always loved history. So that's one of the things that got me into Orthodoxy when we were leaving the Southern Baptist thing. And, we were like, we really like Jesus, but Christians stink. We're just done with Christians. They're just stupid and annoying and mean, and they're not very Christ-like. I think it was Gandhi who said, I like your Jesus, but your Christians, not so much. I was kind of like, yeah, Gandhi's right. Christians are jerks. So anyway, just because it was very bitter, the whole Southern Baptist thing, because they were becoming woke, in my opinion. I've written about it. So like we were like, we like Jesus, but I guess we're just not going to go to church. He discovered Orthodoxy. He and my kids came to it quicker. It's very common. Oftentimes women come to it slower than men. And one of the selling points was he's like, look at the history, Rebecca. Look at the history. 2,000 years of history. Before 1517, there was a church. before the great schism in 1054, there was a church. Why don't you go back? Go all the way back. Let's go back to the beginning. And so, I started, wow, okay, this is interesting. So history. Why are things happening? Who are these people now that are doing these bad things? Where did they come from? You start to connect dots. Now, people would call this conspiracy theories, but a conspiracy is just 2 or more people planning to do something. That's all that means. And then you throw theory on the end because I guess the CIA invented that term to debunk people who were questioning things. So that's it. I mean, but wasted time. That's one thing I really want to impress upon in this interview. And I wanted to ask you, do people that you're interviewing talk about feeling used or like they were pawns? Because that's something I think that could maybe crack the veneer of people who are participating in this. You're not just randomly, autonomously choosing these things. You're doing things that have been pre-chosen by other people who do not have your best interest. So do they ever talk about feeling used like that? Because I'm not like, not as a victim, like I'm going to sue these people. No, just like waking up to be like, I don't think for myself. I don't do for myself. I'm completely pre-programmed, and people can predict my behavior before I even do it. And that's one thing that the subversives that don't like me, I think one of the reasons they don't like me is because I used to be a leftist. I can predict what they're going to say and do before they do it because they're predictable, because I used to walk in their shoes, and it's nothing original. They're not doing anything original. So can I ask you a question? Do people ever talk about feeling used?
Yes, not they wouldn't articulate it that way, but there's been guests on the show that have discussed after they themselves were canceled and the woke mob turned on them, they were introspective enough to say, I was doing the same thing. I canceled other people, and the pain I caused other people, they were a victim of that ethos. And but not necessarily that they were a victim of some kind of psyops or anything like that. There's been others that have discussed that they were in mental bondage. They characterize it in spiritual terms. I was being used by the devil type thing. But yeah, absolutely. I think we wrestle not with flesh and blood, and so they are being used. They are being used to extend the kingdom of darkness. And ultimately, Rebecca, this is a war. It's not a war necessarily against our society or masculinity, femininity, the family. It's a war on God being the creator, and this narcissism that develops that you become God and that you craft your destiny, versus we're made in the image of God and we have a moral duty to him, and there's ethical and moral responsibilities. It's like we become the highest authority. And I think most people that I've been in contact with, that they would affirm that it's a self-centered God, basically, of doing my own thing.
It's self, yeah. It's pride. And I think, again, we talked about this before we started recording, but the whole ally thing and, the self-flagellation of, hating yourself for being white or a man or a southerner or whatever it is, it's pride. You're not doing that because you're selfless. You're doing that because you think it's going to win you points in society. We see that increasingly, this whole like social credit system and stuff. It's pride, and it's also cowardice. If you don't call out someone's sin in a loving way, a family member, I mean, how weak is that? Oh well, I'm just gonna let it happen because okay, and we still love it. Well, you could still love people and know that what they're doing is going to cause them hurt, not just
Yeah.
physical hurt, but spiritual hurt, and separation from God is the worst. And so if you have somebody who's inverting male and female, or inverting the sacrament of marriage with gay marriage or whatever it happens to be, or saying that God doesn't love white people, but he thinks black people are the greatest things since sliced bread. I mean, all of those things are like a can't jibe um, the Christianity test. God loves us all. He is imprinted on all of our hearts, and he wants us to be in communion with him. Well, you can't do it if you're worshiping some people, or believing in these other ideological things. And if you're really destroying, not just spiritually but physically, that's another thing too. So I think the biggest physical ramification of growing up in like the 90s, early 2000s with that kind of liberalism, the biggest thing would be the premarital sex. So that's physically damaging you, but the abortion that comes along with it. You say we still have those things that are all amplified. Now you put on top of it, way more sodomy than back then. I mean, I don't think, I don't know, like maybe a handful of gay men, a couple of lesbians here and there, but now you've got like even heterosexual people doing sodomy. So you throw that on top of it. And then, of course, all the trans stuff and the mutilation and the lupron. Is that what it's called? Lupron that they
Yeah.
take? And yeah, it's going to destroy people's bone mass and all this kind of stuff. This, I mean, all that's just been upped. So it's all the worst things of back then, but amplified with a bunch of other junk thrown on top of it. So, yeah, it's an aversion.
Why do you think one thing that's fascinating is, before I used to look at Orthodoxy as, traditional way for European immigrants to America to maintain their Christian connection to the homeland, the culture, the food, the fellowship, the faith, also the language. That was primarily the way I viewed Orthodoxy. But I find so many people that were ex-leftists that have left this man-made ideology that's been on the scene for a relatively short time. They're not going to mainline denominations when they leave. And we see like the mainline denominations are just imploding in terms of growth. They're shrinking. Congregations are shutting down. The amount of people that are going to like the 7 mainline denominations mostly have all come out really promoting gay marriage, and now they've gone into the trans activism. And those churches aren't growing. They're not sustaining people, and they're not really preaching the Christian gospel. But yet, when we look at Orthodoxy and we line up Orthodoxy versus wokeism, there's a very clear roles between male and female. There is a patriarchy. There is a history. There's continuity that's been the same since the Great Schism of 1054. It's the same liturgy. The Divine Liturgy is repeated all over the East and in the Orthodox churches, and that's been going on for almost 1,000 years. And so that continuity, the incense, the icons, there's something that attracts ex-leftists to that structure. I was wondering if you would agree with that, or if you had anything to flesh that out a little bit.
Well, I do agree with that. And I'm actually co-founder of a fellowship called the Ludwell Orthodox Fellowship. I'm actually drinking out of a Ludwell Orthodox Fellowship mug.
And he was the first Orthodox convert to America, right?
Yep. He was the first known Orthodox convert in North America and possibly even the Americas. And he was like around the time of the founding, related to the Lee family of Virginia through marriage. Knew George Washington, was in like the House of Burgesses and all this kind of stuff. But if you go to our website, southernorthodox.org, there's my plug. And our tagline is nurturing the roots of orthodoxy in Dixie's land. So we're specifically a fellowship for the South because that's where we live. And we see that connection to the Virginian, Philip Ludwell III. And we can try to tell people who think, oh, it's this foreign religion. Like when my husband told me, oh, I want to go to an Orthodox church. And I was like, that's just a Greek thing. I was just like, I didn't even, it's like I knew they were Christians, but I didn't even know it was an option. I was like, that's just something Greeks do, right? Like, I guess I thought Russians did it. I was clueless, I was like, what? But we see it as the original true church. So we're like, no, you're really going back to your roots. And on top of that, there are Western saints. So it's not just, saints from Russia or Ukraine or, Bulgaria or whatever, there are saints from Ireland and Scotland and Britain, there are Western saints. So, we're trying to tie that in, like, it's like coming home, like going way back, but you're coming home. But back to it growing, there's a couple of things. So when we were thinking about becoming Orthodox, I hadn't even become catechumens yet, but we're visiting, we're thinking, we're reading, we're talking. My mother-in-law was like, well, I'm not talking you out of it, but maybe you want to look into more like conservative Protestantism. And I was like, oh, there's such a thing. And she's like, well, what about like Lutheranism and the Missouri Synod? And, they're pretty, they have like a liturgy and they have a hierarchy and stuff like that. And now they're going wokey woke, and she's United Methodist. And, we have elders and we have this and that, and she's like, maybe you should look into UMC. Well, we all know what's happening with that. They just had a giant schism, and now she's not even in the UMC anymore. She's global. So we just started thinking, I don't know, why try? I don't mean to be mean, but I can't think of a better way. Like, why try to keep putting lipstick on a pig? Like, let's just go, like, throw the Hail Mary, so to speak, if that's heretical to say, I don't know. But anyway, let's just go for it. We're just going old school. We're going to Orthodoxy. So anyway, we just said, we had jumped so many churches within Protestantism, and we kept thinking, oh, this is the place. And it just kept, each one would just start bending. It wasn't called woke back then, but just start bending to the world. And anytime I'd hear the word social justice in a sermon, I'm like, I'm hitting the road, unless they were criticizing it, which they never were. So I'm just like, red flag, I'm out of here. I'm done. So anyway, it was the SBC actually banning the Confederate battle flag. That was my last straw with them. And it's not that I even think a battle flag should be in a church, but it's like they got American flags in churches. If some dude in Alabama wants to put a battle flag, what is it any of their business? So anyway, the whole anti-Southern thing I did not like. That's another thing, my evolution from, leftist, whatever. I also tapped into being proud of my Southern roots and looking into my ancestry and reading about the war, the late unpleasantness, the war of Northern aggression, as we say. So I started, scales came off my eyes with that. So anyway, we decided to just go for orthodoxy. And then I think other people are coming into it for the same reasons. They've been burned. I mean, I think there's some I don't think there's some spiritual abuse going out there. And it does happen in orthodoxy too. We are not perfect. We are not perfect. I talk to people and write essays and have podcasts about how there's subversion within orthodoxy too, but there is a much bigger push against it. And on top of that, we don't have a pope. So we are decentralized. Yes, we have a hierarchy, we have a structure, but we're decentralized too. So orthodoxy happens to be growing in the South, but it's dying in like the ethnic enclaves in the Northeast. And my parish is almost all converts. Almost all converts. It's in the Russian Orthodox Church outside of Russia. We have two people I think that are half Russian, and not that we don't welcome Russians, but we're not a bunch of babushkas in there. It's converts. It's people from our region, mostly speaking, from the South that go there. And that's one of the things that the subversives, the academics, the scholars, the experts in orthodoxy hate, because they want the church shrinking, and they don't like that we will push back against them because we have seen the damage done to our Catholicism, to our Protestantism, whatever. We saw the damage of something that we thought was good and could very well be good, but we saw the infiltration, and we call it out, and that's why they don't like us. And they actually, not turn this into a super like inside baseball thing, but they use convert as an ad hom. That's a new thing. That tells you something. If you're not Orthodox, right? Don't you think converting people, it's the Great Commission. It's what we're all supposed to do. And they use it as an insult. Oh, they're just a convert. Oh, they're just trying to get converts to come. It's like, that's what we're all supposed to be doing. We're all supposed to be doing the heavy lifting on that. So it's wild, but it's part of America. I mean, and I say this as a person who considers myself a patriot. Like I have people go back to founding stock. That's that, speaking your mind, and calling out bad things that are happening to the things you love, that create order and goodness and beautiful things that help society foster in a good way. Calling that out, I don't think there's anything more patriotic than that. And it's just a good thing to do, because people should be held account, and nobody is allowed to not be criticized. I don't think anybody. Now, how you do it depends on the person, the situation. I get that, but I mean, clergy can be called out. Bishops can be called out. I mean, if you look at history, that's been throughout history too. Like I think it was Mark of Ephesus was like the one bishop. Yeah, thank you. It has been fun, and I think it's my internet that's been going out, so I apologize. I told my kids not to be streaming something, but perhaps they are. But anyway, yes, thank you. My final exhortation is exactly what you just said. Take the opportunities for the psychological martyrdom to draw you closer to Christ. Don't despair. Focus on the things, the smell the roses stuff. We are still so blessed. I mean, I can't even number all the blessings I have. Focus on those things. Have balance. That's the thing that I have a hard time mastering in my life. Being a mom, being a wife, having a podcast, going to church, trying to get exercise. Balance. Try for balance, because none of those things is bad. None of those things have to be mutually exclusive. So try for balance, and just pray and try to get closer to God. Have these opportunities be God moments. And I say this as a person who struggles with prayer, Bible reading, I set an alarm for it, that kind of thing. But habits, good habits and balance. And last would be dissidentmama.net. That's how you can find all my stuff. My essays are there. And then I have show notes pages that will link you to videos and audio of my podcasts. I'm not real prolific. I do about 2 a month. So I think I'm on like episode 83, and I started back in 2020. So I'm not putting like one out a day or one out a week, but I try to interview people who are smart. And I don't mean smart like high IQ, just they know what's up. And they're all over the map too, as far as like they're under, I guess, the traditionalism umbrella, but these aren't carbon copies of each other. So I interview people where I'll agree with 85% of what they say, but maybe 15 I don't. But I let them speak. I mean, that's kind of my thing. I try not to interrupt or disagree with my guests. Just let them speak because there are a lot of different opinions out there on nuances about issues. And then as far as the Ludwell Orthodox Fellowship goes, that's southernorthodox.org. We just had our first conference in September. It was a smashing success. We hope to have another one next year. So, and that's it. And then, all the social media buttons are on those websites as well.
Perfect. Okay. Well, Rebecca, God bless you. And thank you again for coming on the show today.
God bless you, and thank you for having me on. I feel like I know you, so hopefully I can have you on my show one day and maybe meet you in person sometime.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. You take care.
Thank you.